Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. All right, so we've all been there, worrying about if you'll have enough to really cover the bills, or maybe to pay for that new set of tires, maybe the combine repairs that added up more than what we thought. Maybe your son or daughter needs new braces, or it's back to school time and we're going to be school shopping for 3, 4, 5 kids, or whatever the case is. Anything that really just gives you kind of that anxiety, kind of that never enough mindset that's constantly stealing your peace and your progress. Well, that's scarcity. And if you guys listened to last week's episode, we talked about scarcity on that episode. And so kind of just really, this is the second part of that episode. And we talked about scarcity versus an abundance mindset. Well, mostly last week, we talked about scarcity. And we talked about how scarcity basically steals things from you. Steals your peace, steals your progress, having that never enough mindset attitude. And so now we're talking about how do we flip this to an abundance mindset, talking about abundance and really focusing on that. If you ever feel like abundance is one of those, it's kind of, you have to live in a different world. Maybe those that have abundance are living in a different world, a different set of challenges, maybe even oblivious to those that are around, things that are around them. So I feel like whenever you think about somebody that has an abundance mindset, that's usually what comes to mind is, well, they're off in their own little world. They don't have money problems. They don't have problems like somebody else does, or like maybe you do, or like you might be facing right now, whether it be financial, whether it be mentally, physically, spiritually, relationships wise, whatever you want to talk about there. It's everything. It's all inclusive. But we also feel like sometimes those that live in abundance mindset or aren't affected by the challenges that they face are just oblivious, or completely just kind of oblivious out in left field, not worrying about reality things. And so do you even feel like an abundance mindset is possible for you? And so that might actually be the one thing that, as you ask that question to yourself and you answer it honestly, that might be a pretty true indicator if you think you have an abundance mindset in the first place. So if you ask yourself, do you feel like an abundance mindset is even possible for you? And you say no, well, yeah, I'd say that's kind of red flag number one. And that's if you don't even see the possibility of an abundance mindset, well, that's why we need to kind of work on changing that and flipping that. That's why you're probably currently stuck in the scarcity mindset. And what we talked about in last week's episode is probably ringing pretty true for you. By the way, I want to clarify going into this episode and even building upon last week's episode with the scarcity mindset, these are all very real feelings that I feel just the same as you do probably. And so, talking about the scarcity side of things, very real, raw conversation that we had there. So hopefully there's some things that you found valuable and you can identify with that, because a lot of times I still deal with that. But at the end of the day, I want to do my best. I want to do my best to live an abundance mindset. And so part of recording these episodes is to sometimes remind me of everything that we need to be working on. Myself, I need to be working on these things. And so it's a good reminder. It's a good kind of way to hold me in check. Hopefully I can kind of record these with an integrity of that I'm doing my best to work on these as well. I have not perfected this, but we're doing our best to focus on this. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this week's episode is basically what's possible. Flipping this to an abundance mindset to really focus on what's possible. So flipping that mindset, going from never enough to I have all that I need. And it's really just kind of about the way that you see things and the perspective that you have, and basically flipping this to a different perspective. We've all heard the phrase glass half full versus glass half empty. Maybe you heard that early on and you're like, I don't fully understand that. You still have a glass. There's still water in it. It's either half full or it's half empty. It doesn't necessarily change. It's the exact same circumstances. It does not change, but it's how you view things. It's your perspective. It's your worldview. And that's all shaped by your past and everything that you've been through in your past, maybe how you're taught, trained, and conditioned growing up, how maybe your parents' even worldview and perspective shaped yours. So, not necessarily going to dive into that, but being aware that that's how your worldview is shaped, that's how your perspective is shaped, and that's how you see things moving forward, right? So, back to that glass half full, glass half empty, you might be able to ask yourself, based on your perspective, is why am I seeing these things this way? Back to that perspective, it's all about that. The reality doesn't change, the circumstances don't change. That glass is still at the same level. It's just how we view it. We can either view it as the glass is half empty and I got nothing left. I need to preserve what I have, or the glass is half full. I've got more than enough to sustain me to do what I need. And so the big goal with this episode, and I want to bring this up so that way you stay tuned, right? I want to make sure that you have a goal in mind as to what we're trying to accomplish as we talk about this abundance mindset. The big goal here is to gain some clarity. When back to that scarcity mindset, when we're in that scarcity mindset, it's really hard for us to see things clearly as they are and deal with the challenges at hand. So the big thing here is to gain some clarity, and abundance mindset is definitely going to help you do that. We also want to take away the fear. Take away the fear that we live in, the fear of the challenges that we're facing, that are always going to be there, by the way. But we're trying to take away that fear so that way we can operate with a resilient mindset. Those that can operate with a resilient mindset are willing to see what's possible. They are willing to take on the challenges. They're not worried so much. They're not constantly faced with fear. They are willing to withstand the challenges at hand. And then the next one here is going to be just be able to make better decisions. Usually, those that operate in an abundance mindset, and even think back to maybe there's a couple times to where you feel like you are operating in abundance mindset and things were going good, or you're not worried about all the challenges at hand as much. Usually we're focused more long-term. We're thinking long-term. We're making better decisions. We're not just solely reacting to the short term, which is what constantly happens when we're in that scarcity mindset. So we're always kind of reacting to the short term, what's happening to our current challenges, our current hard season. We kind of talked about that last time, is our current hard season. And so we just really want to focus on the goal here of making better decisions. And then the last one here, the last goal would be so that way we can have more opportunities because we can actually see the opportunities. We're focusing on what's possible, not just reacting to the short-term circumstances and challenges that we're facing. We're seeing what's possible. We're focusing on more opportunities. And by the way, when we see more opportunities come our way. So that's the thing there that I want to make sure that we're really focusing on here with the goal of this episode, with the goal of having an abundance mindset. That is ultimately what we're after. I do want to clarify. This is very important to kind of clarify before I go on, because we're talking about opportunities. I mentioned it earlier. When it comes to an abundance mindset, you feel like there's maybe people that have an abundance mindset, but they're just oblivious. We're not talking about being oblivious. We need to ask ourselves the honest question of, am I being optimistic or am I being oblivious? Because there's times that we can kind of teeter on that fence of both sides to that. Maybe we're just being oblivious and we're ignoring the current challenges at hand. We're thinking, not worried about it. It'll be fine. I'm not going to pay attention to the challenges. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to take any action against it either, by the way, or being proactive to kind of set ourselves up for success, right? And so when you be oblivious, we are kind of disconnected from reality. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to ignore reality. Everything we face right now is real. Okay, as a farmer, everything that you face right now is real. The inflation is real. The labor rates at the John Deere dealership are real. The input costs are real. Seed costs are real. The weather challenges that you face are real, whether it be drought or too much rain or too much moisture or a hailstorm that just came through. Political issues, market issues, everything that we face is real. And same thing, if you're a business owner, constantly trying to face time management issues, that's real. Trying to face getting all the bills paid. If you're a startup, trying to make sure that you're doing the right things. You're focusing your time where it needs to be. And as a parent, everything as a parent, husband, wife, all of those challenges we face are real. All the problems that we are going to encounter are real. We are not trying to ignore reality. We are just trying to make sure that we see things with the right perspective. So we're not pretending, but rather we're believing that despite the challenges, you can get through that. And that goes back to that resilient mindset. Trying to face things with the resilient mindset that, okay, these challenges are at hand. I think it's important, by the way, to name the challenges so that way we're not being oblivious. We're not just trying to forget about them because, so side little comment here, when it comes to being oblivious, is I've actually always adopted this mentality. This is something I came up with myself back when I was younger. Back when I did not like thunderstorms. Okay. I just didn't like them. I mean, even when I was a kid, I just didn't like thunderstorms. So I came up with this mentality, this kind of mantra, if you will, is if you don't think about it, you don't worry about it. And I think there's a lot of goodness that comes from that. A lot of, we don't worry about things if we're not thinking about them or thinking about the negative things. But I will say, as I think about that statement, if we don't think about it, we don't worry about it, that allows a person to kind of be oblivious. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't think about the challenges. I'm not saying that we should ignore them, ignore reality. We got to make sure that we're thinking about things and being proactive and facing the challenges head on. But it's despite the challenges, we have the resilient mindset that we are going to get through this. We're not pretending, we're believing. And that's what I want to kind of really hit on there is I want to clarify that because when we talk about being optimistic, is really sometimes people can associate optimism with being oblivious and being detached from reality. And that's not the case here because that's not ultimately going to get you where you want to go in the long run anyways. And so making sure that we're not detaching from reality, but we are believing that despite the challenges, despite the problems, we can get through, we can win. And so here's kind of the build upon that even further, talking about the problems. I want us to have the mindset and I want us to ultimately become a problem solver. And when I say us, I mean me, I mean you, I mean all of us. I mean everybody listening to this that wants to just better themselves. We want to become a problem solver. The world is full of problems, and that, my friends, is not going to change. So you can either see a problem as a problem, or you can see a problem as an opportunity. So problem solvers become winners. Therefore, those that have the ability to solve problems have the ability to win. And if you see the problems as a chance to win, then the problems are now reframed as an opportunity to win. So I say all of that. Everything this episode kind of comes down to this is reframing the mind. That's why we call it Pioneer Mindset. Probably tired of me saying that, but ultimately I'm glad we picked that name because that's what we're trying to do here is to change this mindset that we have. And I'm trying to change my mindset as well as I record these episodes, as I think about being a problem solver. You can either see the problem as a problem or you can see a problem as an opportunity. And that's really just about flipping that mind. We're not changing the fact that there's still a problem. We're not taking that away. We're not changing the circumstances. We're not changing the fact that I have to go to the Deere dealership and pay $190 an hour for labor rates if I want them to fix the machine for me. I'm not changing the fact that I got to go and spend $45 an acre on herbicide on post-herbicide pass because that's what it costs. That's because input costs are so high. Or the fact that nitrogen is through the roof because a war started. Stupid stuff like that, right? I'm not changing those circumstances. I'm not changing the fact that in most cases, we as farmers are price takers instead of price makers. But I want to be able to take these problems and see them as opportunities. Okay, because then that flips the mindset. That changes the fear to optimism. That takes away the fear and helps us gain some clarity in whatever we're facing. That helps adapt that resilient mindset because if we do that once, we do it again, we do it again. Now we've conquered all of these problems that we've been faced with. We didn't hide from them, we didn't run from them, we didn't pretend they didn't exist. We conquered them. And then as we conquer things, as we do hard things, we build that resilient mindset. And then we have the ability to make better decisions. And now we're thinking long-term and not just reacting to short-term scarcity mindset issues. And so now we see these opportunities that come our way. And so to build upon that even further, because we're just kind of trying to take this into progression here, talking about becoming a problem solver. Now I want to talk about what you think actually begins to manifest. We're trying to will things into existence. Talking about seeing problems as opportunities and having more opportunities at the end of the day is ultimately what we're after. So trying to will things into existence, was actually looking into this a little bit and I was curious to see if there was maybe any sort of Bible verse out there that talked about this because I think the mindset within the Bible is pretty important as to how we see things. I mean, that's basically what the Bible's helping us do is helping us kind of curate the proper mindset to live a good life, to be a good human. The one verse that I kind of came up with as I was doing a little bit of research on this was Romans 12:2. So it basically goes like this. Don't be shaped by the patterns of the world around you, but be changed from the inside out by renewal of your mind. So you're able to recognize and live out what is good, pleasing, and complete. So the big thing here that we're trying to talk about is basically willing things into existence by having that optimistic mindset, by not being oblivious, but having that optimistic mindset, by seeing opportunities at hand, by seeing the positivity in things, by seeing things as the glass half full versus the scarcity mindset of the glass half empty, we are now willing good things into our life. And that's really what takes this into another level of we're not just trying to live day by day in that stuck in that scarcity mindset. And we've all been there. I've been there too, probably quite a bit recently, if I'm being honest, right? Stuck in that day to day where we wake up and it's one day at a time and we're not sure how we're even going to conquer anything in the future because we're only focused at the current season at hand because that's always the hardest. That's always the hardest. But by living in that mindset, that does not allow us to live in abundance. That does not allow us to bring peace back to our life. And we talked about that before. Scarcity steals peace and progress. So we're trying to get that back. We're trying to get that back by shifting this to an abundance mindset. And by shifting things to an abundance mindset to where we're focusing on the glass half full, we're focusing on the opportunities at hand and everything that we have. And really all that we've been blessed with, really, talking about the Bible verse here, all that we've been blessed with. And we do that by kind of changing our mind and changing the way that we see things. So that's kind of one thing there that you look at maybe other people, because let's face it, it's pretty easy to compare ourselves to other people. And back to the scarcity mindset, that's really what gets us into that mindset a lot of times is when we are comparing ourselves to other people. So let's face it, we do that. So let's just kind of talk about that for a second. When we're looking at other people, maybe even specifically looking at other people that feel like they have it all, or maybe things seem to come better for them or easier for them, or I'm not saying just even from a financial standpoint, but they've got a lot of good positive vibes or energy, if you will. And a lot of times, maybe they are operating in a state of abundance and have a mindset that's focused more on abundance and that they have enough. So maybe they are a bit more content. But therefore, when they will things into existence, when they think about how, well, good things are going to happen to them, not just constantly focused on not enough or the things that they don't have, when they're focused on the things that they're trying to basically accomplish, maybe they're believing that despite all of the challenges that they face, because they do still face challenges, as much as you want to tell yourself that people that have it all don't face challenges, you're absolutely wrong in that because everyone still faces their own set of challenges. Everyone has their own cross to carry, if you want to go that deep and that far. But at the end of the day, they are just able to adapt the proper mindset that they're willing to will things into existence. And ultimately, things happen probably more to them because they're willing to see the opportunities that are out there. They're able to shift that mindset to abundance. Let's kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this. How do we get to that point? And last week, we kind of talked about a few practical things. We talked about being able to acknowledge the things that you've been able to accomplish, taking action, and doing things that help us get into that abundance mindset. So we're going to kind of build upon that a little bit, but with just kind of adding to it. So how do we take some practical things that we can do to get us into that abundance mindset? The one thing here that I was kind of thinking about with this is maybe just allowing yourself to be okay with where you're at right now. So going back to that scarcity mindset, we're usually never okay with where we're at right now. We're never content. We never have enough, whether it be enough money, enough time, enough progress, enough results. We just never have enough. And by thinking that we never have enough, we're never really okay and content with where we are right now. If we can try to flip that a little bit and just say, hey, I'm exactly where I need to be. So allow yourself to be okay with where you're at right now. And so furthermore, I actually try to do it really consistently, probably daily. I remember this phrase. It's kind of part of my prayers in the morning, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. Just kind of always this phrase that it comes to mind for me. And there's more to it, but I'm just going to state this one part of it because it really aligns with what we're talking about, being okay with where you are. So you have placed me exactly where I need to be and chosen me for a specific purpose. Free me from fear and guide my decisions. So as I say that, and I say that consistently, maybe multiple times throughout the day, maybe I forget to do it on a couple days, but I try my best to repeat that kind of a grander prayer there, if you will. But that part there in the middle really aligns with being able to kind of shift this mindset to you are exactly where you need to be. You have placed me exactly where I need to be. If you are a true believer in God and everything that He's been able to accomplish, and He put you here for a reason, He created you specifically. Do you not believe that He wouldn't keep you exactly where you're supposed to be and created you for a specific purpose? So the big thing here is we're just trying to kind of flip that mindset to, okay, it is okay. You are where you're supposed to be. Okay, so back to acknowledging what you've been able to accomplish. Okay, so what have you gotten accomplished? And I wanted to pause on that because I mentioned that last time, kind of being able to, okay, what are the wins? What are the things that we got accomplished? What are some things that went well? What are some things that worked? And focusing on that, not what didn't work or what we haven't got accomplished. If that works for you, if that's something that works for you to basically acknowledge what you've gotten accomplished, that's great. It can be very helpful. But I also want to state that sometimes that doesn't always work. And what I mean by sometimes, I bring this up because it happens to me all the time, is if I go about the process of acknowledging the wins and what we've accomplished, is it's pretty easy to fall back into that trap of I've only done X. And the true word there is only. That's the word that we want to highlight because the only is what keeps you trapped into that scarcity mindset. Keeps you in I haven't done enough. And when somebody is humble, thirsty, and striving for more, it's pretty easy to stay trapped in that, and myself included. And I've done that. So that's why if it works for you to kind of acknowledge what you have accomplished and the things that you've done, great. If you do find yourself in that trap, let's not go there. Let's acknowledge this pattern that we get into. Okay, well, this guy on the podcast that I listened to said to do this, but once I did that, I still stayed in this trapped in the scarcity mindset because I was still focusing on the things that I hadn't done yet. Well, let's recognize that pattern as it happens. Let's learn from it so we don't keep repeating it. But maybe rather than just asking ourselves, what have we gotten accomplished and then falling back into that trap, we ask ourselves at the end of the day, did I give it my best? I've done this before to where when I lay my head down at night, if I can say I've done my best, there's a lot of peace that comes upon that. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I forget about some of those different things at the end of the day. You hear this from this, that, or the other person, see it on social media, hear it from a podcast, this, that, or the other person said, do this thing, that thing, this thing. And all of a sudden we've got like 10 things to do, 20 things to do throughout our day. Ask ourselves this at the beginning of the day, ask ourselves this at the beginning of the day, learn from this, learn from that. So I understand that sometimes it's hard to keep adding to our days. Even these little phrases as did I give it my best, it can be hard to remember to do all that. Yeah, that happens, right? But with this phrase specifically, if we're trying to get out of that scarcity mindset and into abundance, into that peace and contentment that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And maybe you've got a hard time acknowledging everything you've been able to accomplish because you're focusing on everything you're trying to still do. This is one of those phrases that I think can bring a lot of peace and contentment back to you. It keeps that scarcity from stealing that peace and progress that it always does. So did I give it my best today? And generally, I'm going to say for most of us that are listening to this that are just trying to do our best, the answer is going to be yes. Okay, if you can say yes, if you can say, Lord, you have placed me exactly where I need to be and chose me for a specific purpose, free me from fear and guide my decisions, what more is there? What more is there than that? What we're trying to do here is just get to that point where we have that peace and contentment and we can be okay with where we're at. And maybe then now focus on the future, see the opportunities at hand, see the problems as they come, not ignoring them, not pretending, but believing that I am where I'm supposed to be. These challenges were brought to me, for me, not to me. They were brought for me so I can work myself through them. And I have the resilience. I've been through things. I am exactly where I need to be so I can accomplish these things. And so within that, talking about the resilience mindset, because that's what we're trying to cultivate here, it is okay to remember what we've been through and what we've actually done. When we acknowledge the wins, like we talked about before, it's like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When we're doing that, we're trying to remember what we've been through. Okay, we're trying to build in that resiliency mindset when we've done that. Acknowledge that we've taken action, we've done things. That's what we're trying to do. But within that, we're also trying to cultivate that resiliency mindset. So remember what we've been through. And I kind of talked about that in last week's episode, acknowledging different things that we have been through. Maybe we went through a really dark scarcity mindset time and acknowledge that we went through that, or maybe went through an extremely tough financial situation. Maybe I had some relationship issues that we went through, we made it out of it, and use that to cultivate the resiliency mindset. We use that and we say, okay, I can, I will, and I have. Those three things right there. I can, and I will, and I have. Kind of back to, okay, did I give it my best today? Yes. All right. Well, then I can, I will, and I have. Done. And so that's kind of some really practical tips there. By doing so, we're trying to really focus on what's possible. You see the problems as opportunities, seeing the challenges as opportunities versus seeing a problem as a problem, because that's what most people do today. That's what most people do that are stuck in a scarcity mindset. That's what I do when I'm stuck in a scarcity mindset, is I see the problem as a problem versus an opportunity to get better, stronger, and more resilient. So I really hope, as I talked about everything today, talked about the abundance mindset, talking about building that resilient mindset, talking about I can, I will, and I have, focusing on what's possible. I just want all this to kind of sink in for just a little bit. Okay, hopefully wherever you're at, we can kind of do this little exercise. I want this to just kind of all sink in. And by the way, God placed you exactly where you're supposed to be and chose you for a specific purpose. And I really hope that He frees you from fear and guides your decisions. So now think about what changes. When we adapt that perspective, we adapt that mindset, we see things as the glass half full. Think about what really changes for you. How does that change the way that you feel? Do you feel more free? Do you feel more at peace? Do you feel more joy? Does it release some of the tension that's literally wrapped up in your body? You're wound pretty tight, trying to really focus on everything we got to do, got all the stress, that anxiety that kind of comes upon us, as a husband, father, trying to support our family, trying to run a business, trying to be the best man that we can be in 2026 and be everything and all things, and usually never enough. Your body gets wound up pretty tight, caught up with a lot of tension. So as we flip that, does it release any tension for you? Does it cause you to relax a little bit? Does it cause you to bring back some of that joy? Hopefully that returns to you a little bit. Hopefully the peace comes upon you. Do you feel free at all? Because I know that's the way I feel when I can kind of adapt that mindset. When I feel that way, even now, after I'm talking about this, as I get done recording this, I feel like I'm more willing and able to tackle the challenges at hand that come my way. Now, the big thing here that I'll just kind of add in right at the end is going back to doing our best to keeping this mindset as much as possible. There's going to be times, this is ebbs and flows, this is waves, seasons high and low, but scarcity and abundance are not two permanent seasons. They are basically kind of a pattern that we take ourselves through, and patterns can be shifted, and patterns can be changed, and mindsets can be shifted, and mindsets can be changed, and you can control that at the end of the day. The mindset is one of those few things, despite as much as we kind of don't believe it, the mindset is one of those things that we can actually control. So how often do you find yourself in the scarcity mindset, and can we keep ourselves in that abundance mindset as much as possible? And so kind of back to the feelings. As we're sitting here, we have maybe hopefully a lot of this peace that come upon you as we listen to this, as we've tried our best to adapt this mindset. How do we make sure we don't forget about it as soon as we stop listening to this, as soon as we stop thinking about it? How do we make sure that we have a reminder throughout the day? How do we make sure that we are, more times than not, staying in that abundance mindset of seeing what's possible, taking on the challenges with the belief that I can, I will, and I have? That's ultimately what we're after. So that's really all I have for this week's episode. I hope that tying this back to the scarcity mindset and tying it back to everything that we face, okay? We're not being oblivious. We're trying to be optimistic. We're trying to face things head on and trying to do the best that we can to have that resiliency mindset. Hope you found value in this week's episode. I hope there was something that was useful for you. If there's anything that you think was really, really helpful, that man, I didn't think about this before. I've never thought about this. Or maybe something that's worked for you that I didn't even talk about. Maybe you are the person that is in a really abundance mindset. Maybe you don't even realize that you're just kind of that naturally optimistic person that can be willing to face challenges head on. Maybe there's some qualities that just allow you to be good at that. I would love to hear from you, just to see what's worked for you. Maybe there's some things that I can learn from you and others can learn from you as well. Okay, if you face these challenges, these scarcity mindset, and you find yourself constantly stuck in that, but maybe there's something from this episode that you pulled out that you thought would work really well for you, awesome. If you even want to have a conversation about this because you get stuck there constantly, day after day, and you want to find a way to get yourself out of it, hit me up. Reach out to us at pioneerfarmer.org, and we'd love to have that conversation and chat. But that's all I got for this week's episode, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.